When I first played This Is the Police, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It had a somewhat engaging story and mechanics that were functional enough to make a decent management sim, but I just couldn't figure out what it needed. It's only now with the release of This Is the Police 2 that it finally dawned on me, but for every step the sequel takes forward it also trips, shoots itself in the leg and bleeds out on the floor. In the interest of fairness, let's start with what works. The basic day-to-day task of selecting a roster of on-duty cops and sending them out to calls is still fairly interesting, and this process is given depth by the game giving your cops individual stats that can be improved. The game gives you an incentive to send out teams with a wide variety of skills because each crime offers a number of solutions, some of which can prove disastrous if your crew isn't trained in the relevant skill. These skills also come into play in the game's new tactical missions, where you actively control a team of cops as they assault various gang operations. These segments play out using turn-based isometric mechanics, and your officer's skill level allows them to equip various perks. These perks range from increasing your accuracy at the cost of movement, to allowing cops to break down or lockpick doors, and while a number of these perks feel less than useful, for the most part they allow for some varied approaches to the tactical missions. This Is the Police 2 also introduces various NPCs that can perform a number of services for you. They can buy evidence from you for a quick cash injection, train your officers in certain skills, or alleviate status conditions from your staff such as alcoholism and exhaustion. Unfortunately, I really only found the vendor NPCs useful, as your officers' skills will go up pretty quickly if you're smart with where you send them, and the recovery NPCs just seem to not work at all. That last point in particular gets very frustrating when a handful of your staff always comes in drunk, despite you spending the time and money to have this problem fixed. As well as a few neat mechanical additions, This Is the Police 2 keeps its unique art style from the first game, and has expanded its soundtrack to feature some electro, synth, and rock tracks, in addition to the constant morose blues of the original. It also tries to build from the plot of the previous game, but that's kind of where This Is the Police 2 loses me. This Is the Police 2 picks up where the first left off, with former police chief Jack Boyd hiding out in a rural town until he gets caught up in another police force's mess. The game focuses on Jack's attempts to keep his cover from being blown, which entails paying people off, assisting the current town sheriff, and getting rid of anyone who wanders too close to the truth. While it's an interesting setup, the game just never knows when to get the fuck on with it. Every single cutscene drones on and on and on, often with no rhyme or reason. There was a good minute or two there where the game just forces you to sit and watch as two cops talk about mold, for fuck's sake! On top of that, none of the characters are particularly likable, and only a handful of them know how to speak like actual real human beings. The core of the story is a great hook, but it's covered in so much extraneous bullshit that I was bored before the halfway point. If I hadn't been reviewing the game, it's likely I would have just skipped as much of it as I could, in hopes that I could at least unlock a pure gameplay mode by hitting the end. A feat that I'm yet to accomplish, because the game is a technical fucking nightmare! Sometimes, at random intervals, buttons just don't work. I've been playing on the Switch, so these may be console specific, but if you use the D-pad for menu navigations, the up button straight up doesn't work 90% of the time. I've had bugs that wouldn't allow me to pick an entire column of my staff when assigning the next day's roster. I've had crucial text boxes rendered unscrollable, forcing me to throw cops at a side mission without a clue as to how I'm actually supposed to solve the issue! Because the mission requirements were at the bottom of the text! These bugs and glitches happen constantly, and to top it all off, the game fucking crashed on me at least 3 times. But even when the game is running smoothly, it's far from perfect. As I mentioned before, some cops will still come into work drunk despite you having spent the time and money to get them clean, which often results in an injury that can take days to fix. Sure, you can remove that cop from the board entirely, but you're likely to get a replacement that isn't anywhere near as good if you get one at all. And I'm not even sure if this is a bug. This might be a feature. It just sucks. Even the gang operations don't come away unscathed. Working your way through a gang member by member is still a cool idea, but the game's interrogation and torture mechanics are vague as fuck. Interrogations in particular often give you one shot to choose the correct question, with no hint or indication of what each criminal might respond best to. The torture mechanic fares a little better, as you have health and willpower meters to indicate how effective you're being, as well as medical reports that can tip you off to a subject's fears and previous injuries, so at least you're not flying blind. But even this can be instantly failed when a criminal randomly becomes immune to torture, despite their file indicating that they should be susceptible to whatever it is you tried on them. It turns the game's gang takedowns into an effort in cluelessness and frustration. About the only mechanics that feel like they work as intended are the day-to-day calls and operations that I began the review with, and even these have their downsides. There are only so many day-to-day calls, so you're bound to hear the same crimes being committed at least a few times. and this makes choosing which crimes to prioritize over others a walk in the park, because the first time you come across a false alarm, it's unlikely to ever trip you up again. The operations, on the other hand, occasionally offer a variant that requires a week's worth of prep, in which the game tells you what skills and perks your squads will need ahead of time. It's a very cool idea, but the game often neglects to tell you that certain cops will require more than just the suggested perks. For instance, the first big operation the game gives you requires one cop strong enough to jump a fence, and two to back them up with different perks. Except, This Is the Police 2 never tells you that the fence is the only way into the area, so that cop gets isolated and killed because backup can't reach them. Well, you would think that because the game knows that at least 3 cops need to head into this area, they all need to be able to jump fences, but no. It doesn't tell you that. It just tells you that one of them needs it. Fuck this game! Beyond its core management and strategy mechanics, This Is the Police 2 does try to spice things up a bit by throwing a few story-based challenges at you as you go, but these are either laughably easy or plot-focused, supposed-to-fail moments, and they end up just feeling like a waste of time. Even returning mechanics such as investigations feel more like time sinks than actual challenges, since the answers to these mysteries are so damn obvious. To be honest, that's not an entirely bad way of summing up This Is the Police 2. Between the bugs that forced me to endlessly retry sections, crashes that would wipe out an entire in-game day of progress, and a story that rambles on and on about nothing, never actually getting to the point, I can comfortably say that I feel like my time was fucking wasted! This Is the Police 2 is awful. I didn't hate the original game, in fact I quite enjoyed it, and to This Is the Police 2's credit, I think it adds that little bit extra that the first game was missing. But it's covered in so much unnecessary crap, so many experience-ruining bugs, and so many poorly implemented mechanics, that it just isn't worth it. Avoid this game like the plague.